Hello, and welcome to episode 109 of the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sarah. I am your host today, and we have a really great conversation. There's a few episodes out there floating around titled "What's Normal, What's Not Normal." So I think this is a really fun series. It's something that I've wanted to expand on. So this week, we are going to chat about what's normal and what's not normal after running a marathon or running your A goal race for the season. And I think this is going to be a really great conversation because we just had the Mesa Marathon. Houston was last month. CIM was the month before that. And it feels like whether you're coming off of a big racing season or you're just getting into training, maybe you're in the middle of training, right? Like we have a lot of spring races coming up. I think this episode's going to be really great. And I chose the marathon distance specifically because there is so much to kind of the aftermath of running a marathon. Now, you can apply some of this to the half marathon distance, and you can definitely take some of it, maybe just a little bit for the 5K and 10K distances, but that could be a whole separate episode. So today it's going to be more about endurance running and what happens after you finish that race. So before we begin, over the weekend, Kelvin Kipton and his coach, I'm sure you've heard this by now, passed away in a car accident. And if you're not familiar with actually who Kelvin is, was an incredible athlete. At 23 years old, he not only won the Chicago Marathon in 2023, but he ran the world record in the marathon, 2 hours, 35 seconds. It was an incredible performance. And he had so much potential. He had so much ahead of him. I think what was really astounding was the mileage that he was running every week, his consistency, staying healthy in the process, and then, of course, absolutely smashing Kipchoge's record and going after his own and holding his own record. He had a spring marathon coming up, the Rotterdam Marathon on April 14th, and then he was also planning to run in the Paris Olympics right next to Kipchoge. So that would have been an incredible thing to witness. And I think it's really hard when you hear news about something sudden happening. And it really took me back. Like, not only is he young, he's also not just a son, not just a teammate, not just an athlete to all of us, but he was also a husband and a father of two small children, which I think is something that wasn't really talked about. I had to kind of dig around for that info. And I think it's so important that we are living the life that we want to live. And I bet Kelvin can say that he lived the life that he wanted to live, right? He was getting to run a lot every single day in Kenya. And he was able to produce these incredible records. He was sponsored by Nike, like he was living a dream. And I think it's really important that we can lean into some of that, right? Living our own dream and what that means for us and what does that look like. And I'm such a big believer that life is now and nothing is ever really guaranteed. And we get to live each day like it could be our last while creating a lot of like daily joy and also doing what we need to do to set ourselves up for that future. So condolences to him and his family. Absolutely like terrible news on Sunday that came out. And I think the lesson out of all of it is live the life that you want to live and go after it. I know I did 4 years ago. I guess it's coming up on 5. That's wild. And quitting my job, taking the summer off from that job right before the pandemic began to do what I wanted to do and figure out how I wanted to spend my life. And I think what's really cool is like through each season, there's always a lot of change, right? Like you can go through a season that's maybe a few years long. You can go through a season that's a few months long. And as long as you're growing, evolving, and doing the things that really make you happy, that is, in my mind, what's most important in this thing that we call life and how precious it is. Over the weekend, I also got to connect with an athlete who listens to the podcast. Her name is Molly. Hi, Molly, if you're listening. She's training for the Santa Barbara Half Marathon. And what was so cool is we got to connect over the weekend, and I'm not coaching her. She does not have an Elevate training plan, but we did have a 60-minute conversation on her running and how she can get the most out of it, where she can up level, how can she show up stronger in this cycle so she can run a strong half. And then ultimately her goal is to run a marathon. So I absolutely loved having that conversation with her. She was just pure joy, which is great on a Sunday. So great. So if you're looking for a 30 or 60-minute consult with me, you can absolutely do that at calendly.com/elevate your running. And lastly, before we get into the episode, did you know that Inside Tracker is here for you? That's right. Are you showing up just a little bit off in training? Maybe you're feeling a little bit more drained than usual, more tired. Maybe you're just showing up inconsistently. Well, are you curious to know kind of what your biomarkers or what your nutrients and your vitamin levels are at, and maybe where you're lacking and where you can up level in that? All the data that Inside Tracker provides helps us objectively measure progress and constantly refine and optimize ourselves, which is so cool. So I know this episode's landing on the 15th. So for one more day, you can get 30% off their bundle packages using code Sarah M Pro Special. And that's Sarah without an H. And yes, that is how I spell my actual like real legal name. SARAM Pro Special. And hey, if the bundle packages aren't right for you, you can use just my standard code, which is Sarah M Pro 25, SARAM Pro PRO 25 for 25% your entire purchase at InsideTracker.com. Now that's going to create some happy and strong running right there. All right, let's get to our elevated moments. My elevated moment for the week is really leaning into what I needed last week and what I continue to need, which is my own downtime to recharge my batteries, and really having to say not now to certain things that came up with Elevate and some certain projects that I knew would be really nice to do, but wasn't really necessarily moving the needle, so to speak. Like all the athletes got all the time and attention that they crave, which to me is like at the end of the day, like on a Friday or, at the end of a week, if I can say that that's done, that's a great week. And all this other stuff, meaning the podcast and social media and connecting on different levels with different athletes and all the run club stuff that's happening in Denver. That's all a lot that's like layered on to the coaching side of things. So it was really nice to take a step back and really honor what I needed coming off of a pretty stressful weekend. So that feels really good. I know it's, as a yes person, I am a recovering yes person. I can take one good step forward and gosh, I can take one good step back. And for anyone who can say, oh my gosh, that's me. I see you. I hear you. It is a work in progress. It might be something that I never actually 100% perfect, but I think the biggest win is being aware of it, of what's happening, what's going on, and taking that step back to say, this is what I need, and this is what's going to help me be a better person to other people and for other people and be able to help other people if I can do this stuff first. So that felt really good. Judy, who is an athlete that I coached, Judy's so great. She's training for the Boston Marathon. Her elevated moment last week was running inclines and getting back to feeling 100%. And she's learning how to run strong and powerful by slowing down and doing less and allowing her body to rest, which is so huge. So Judy had an injury, a stress fracture last fall. I was not working with her at the time. She was overrunning, overstressing her body, running everything way too hard, not resting, trying to do more, right? I think it's really easy to fall into that trap. And there are coaches out there who train that way. And for Judy, it just wasn't working for her. She ended up getting a stress fracture. We're slowly building back to it. And that's the thing with the stress fracture. If you're coming back from an injury like that, it's not something that you can just go back to normal mileage on week one. It is a very, very slow build because the last thing you want to do is take a step back when someone is, or when an athlete's recovering from something like that. So I'm really, really proud of Judy and for her making it through the last several weeks of training, really being inquisitive, asking questions. She really wants to run strong at Boston. And I'm such a coach where I love that overarching goal, but gosh, I really, really love to lean into that weekly process and what the athlete creates on a weekly basis and then building from there, rather than trying to create this or make a goal and overstressing, overrunning the body because of it. So Judy's been incredible. Kudos to Judy. And then Jesus reached out over Instagram and he said, I finally got back to running and making progress. I ran almost 8 miles this week in the matter of 3 days. I know it's not a lot, but it's better than nothing. And that's right, Jesus. That's amazing. It is better than nothing. And I absolutely love that concept. If you're getting back into training, if you have some things in life that have been taking you away from consistent training, or gosh, maybe it's, you're in a huge training cycle. Apparently, I'm in a huge training cycle, everyone. I realized this on my run today. I'm not training for a marathon, but gosh, I am certainly training what feels like I'm training for a marathon. So my mileage this week is now up in, I should run 69, 70 miles this week. And it's at a place where I was consistently running for like 5 to 6 weeks during my last marathon training build. It's a lot of mileage, everyone. 70 miles is no joke. And I had been running about 64, kind of like holding at 63, 64, very slight pullback. I think that was last week. Didn't feel like it because it was only 6 miles or 7 miles, but had a slight pullback. And then today I had a 10-mile run, went out, got it done, got my plan last night. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, here we go, 70-mile weeks. And I know this happened over the weekend. I didn't know I was having a 70-mile week. I know this is probably not the peak since I'm still about 9 weeks out from my race, 8 weeks out from my race. So I'm certainly not at peak. But something that I've been really leaning into because I've been adding more strength on top of it. I've been trying to go to a yoga class once a week. It's a lot. And something I've been leaning into is like that second heavy gym strength day. I tell myself, you just have to start. And if you don't want to do it for an hour, don't do it for an hour, but you have to start it and you get to start it and just see what happens, right? And something is better than nothing. And what typically happens is I usually get the full thing done, right? But maybe you don't. Maybe you get 30 minutes in, or you're going out for a run. And let's say you had the 10-mile run today on a Monday, which, Monday is like my second busiest day out of the week. So maybe tied with Wednesday. Monday and Wednesdays are like very wild days. And, for two very different reasons, which is fine. But sometimes it's saying, 7 or 8 miles, right? Maybe it's half of that. 75% of whatever you're trying to do, saying that's good enough for today because I need to focus on these other things. And then also being aware and not making it or creating like a slippery slope with that. I do coach some athletes where I feel like it's a very easy give. It's a very easy button to push, being like, I'm going to cut this short, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I got back to my car. I didn't feel like going back out. I have heard that before. And their run wasn't finished yet, but they got back to their car. So they ended their run, right? We've probably all been there, right? So something's always better than nothing. I absolutely love that concept. It's going to be something, probably talk about next week inside of a bigger message. So, with that, I'd love to hear your elevated moments and feel free to send them over the website, over Instagram DM, whether that's my Instagram or the Elevate Instagram. I'm behind both. So, you're talking to me no matter what, which is exciting. So today I want to talk about what's normal, what's not normal after racing a marathon. Now, I thought this would be a really great concept because, like I said earlier in the episode, I absolutely love kind of this like title and this theme of let's break down what's normal in training and what's not. Because I think oftentimes we see things on Instagram, we see things on TikTok, on Strava, on Facebook, and it's something way out there, right? It's like something where you question yourself and you're like, should I be doing this too? Right? I had athletes question their entire marathon training cycle after I ran that like bonkers 25-mile long run. And I was like, no, 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 no. This is exactly what I don't want to happen. Like, you are running your first marathon. This is my sixth, and I've stacked over 4 years of running, and like this cycle's going really good. And there's so many reasons behind why I would be doing something like that and someone else wouldn't, or they might be doing more, right? Like the elite athletes always run like over 26 in their training. So when I saw this story that I'm about to share with you online this weekend. I thought, oh, this is good. I wouldn't necessarily have put this out there, but again, I put my 25-mile long run out there. So who knows? So Neely Gracie is an elite athlete. She lives in Boulder, Colorado. She's so amazing. She's a mom. She has two like small kids. She's also a running coach. She has a beautiful, amazing like running coaching practice in Boulder, and she ran the Olympic trials in Orlando last week. So that was Saturday, February 3rd. She also holds the Guinness World Record for the mile while pushing a stroller, which is incredible. I'm pretty sure it was a 5:24 mile. She ran that in Denver on one of like the Tracksmith nights. It was really cool to see that. And recently, she ran the trials and placed 42nd out of her out of the division, which is great. So she ran, in order to qualify for the trials, she ran a PR of 2 hours and 30 minutes and 29 seconds. And that was at CIM in 2022. And she went into her fourth marathon, which was the Olympic trials. And she ran a 2:37:09, which was incredible, right? But it wasn't a PR, right? Like, I guess that was a little over a year before that, she had ran 7 minutes faster. And apparently that wasn't good enough for her. And what I actually read was that during the week after she ran the trial, she flew home immediately and her body felt good. And that's going to be something that we cover today. Her body felt good. She wasn't sore. And that's a really big sign that you didn't give it your all out there, right? Now, it was obviously like warm and humid. And as someone who is impacted by that, I can share that when you're out there running, and it's not to your potential because you're impacted by the heat or by the sun or by the humidity, and you're running this like pace that's just like more moderate than marathon, you're going to finish and feel good. So that's what happened to her. So, plot twist, she jumped on a plane, flew to Mesa, Arizona, and ran a 2:35 1 week later. One whole week later. Mesa was on a Saturday, so it was Saturday to Saturday marathons. She said her body felt good, like she didn't run a marathon, and she really wanted to see what she could do. So, in context, she ran a 5:55 pace on Saturday. Now, Mesa is slightly downhill. It was raining. They had cool weather. It was like honestly perfect racing conditions, versus what she averaged in Orlando, which was flat but warm and humid. And that was a 6:02 pace. So I thought that was incredible that one, her body could do that. I would love to know how she feels today. I bet she feels like she got run over by a truck, um, which isn't a good thing, everyone, but that is a lot of stress on your body. And when you get to this level of running, that time difference can make a whole world of difference. I notice a huge shift now when I'm right at threshold versus 5 or 7 seconds over threshold, under, slower than threshold, right? I bet you do too. It's just a matter of where that pace is of like, it used to be for me, marathon to half was like this, oh my gosh, this feels like totally different. And now it doesn't feel so different. And it's more like 10K ish pace, 8K pace. I can definitely like feel quite a bit different. So this is probably where she lands too, right? So I think that's really interesting. I'd love, love, love to hear how she's feeling today, but I don't know. I haven't seen anything other than the post that she put out on Instagram. It's the exact same time that she ran in the previous Mesa Marathon that she ran, which I thought was last year. So, um, amazing performance. What I really loved about this too is that I think she's coached by her husband, and she consulted with him before just going out and doing it. And I absolutely love that. I think when you're racing, you're training hard, and you're throwing something into the mix that's really playing with fire, right? She was definitely playing with fire in the second marathon. You really got to be all in with your team. Your team has to be all in. And it could have been something that had sidelined her for the rest of the season, right? But thankfully, I mean, we don't know how she feels now, but she was all smiles after the race. So that's really incredible. But what you don't want to do is set yourself up for running something hard like that and then going in and running something hard right away after. Or if you do, you have the buy-in of your coach or your family or whoever is like really supporting you in the journey of where you're going for the marathon to really say like, yeah, let's do this. I think you can recover. I think you can make it happen. So I know I've had some slower marathons. I've had, you know, breakthrough races. I can't say after any of them, I felt like I wanted to run another marathon hard the following weekend. Just saying. I don't think I'll ever do that. All right. So today we're going to talk about a few different pieces to what happens after you run a marathon and what's normal, what's not normal, right? So, body is going to be our first topic, nutrition is our second. And then we're going to tackle sleep, training, mind, and mood. So we have 5 different pillars we're going to work through, and it's going to be awesome. All right. So, what's normal with your body? Now, abnormal training, reverse taper will be important, right? Your reverse taper is going to be uber, uber, uber important. And let me back this up. What's normal over the course of I just need to scroll up. I knew that didn't make sense. All right, we're going to start with the short term, right? The week after the race. So, yes, everyone, I have an outline that I use to talk every week. Austin and I used to have an outline. It works great. It helps us stay on track unless you need to scroll up higher. All right, so bullet point 1, your body. We're going to go over the short term. This is going to be the week after the race, all right? What's normal. So to feel sore, to have those aches and pains, and to have like that shift from like post race soreness into the next 48 hours, it usually intensifies, right? I usually say like if you're racing on Sunday, that Tuesday is not a good day. It's typically the worst day. At least that's in my experience. It's like the worst day. And then Wednesday, it starts to like kind of level out a little bit, right? So if you're traveling right after running a marathon, like let's say you're flying back from, where you raced, oh gosh, that could hit a few different ways. I traveled after the Chicago Marathon, ran a huge PR. It's like 5 minutes, felt incredible the whole time, ran out of runway. That's like such a great feeling. So didn't run my potential, but ran a really strong, great negative split race. It was beautiful. And I had a flight later that night, and I remember getting off the plane and I like could barely walk. Like my hips, my glutes, my hamstrings, nothing wanted to work. Now cut to CIM. I ended up flying back that same day because I didn't want to pay for a hotel. I really didn't want to be in Sacramento another day. I needed to get back for Kenzie. Like there's just a lot going on. So wanted to come back, and I had an athlete ask me about, like, oh, don't you feel like, it was pretty bad after Chicago? And I was like, yeah, it was pretty bad after Chicago, but I'm also planning to take a bunch of time off. So I feel okay with this. Got off the plane. I was fine. Well, I also continued to be fine. So we're going to get to that. But sometimes the travel can be awful. And I wonder if the more you do it, the easier your body adapts to it, just like racing, or if it's one of those things where I'd raced really hard at Chicago. So I obviously felt that getting off the plane, where CIM was a totally different ball game, different day. So I wasn't as sore, right? So that's totally normal. Even to have little niggles pop up, maybe you're walking, you're like, gosh, my Achilles is kind of sore, my knee's kind of sore. That's all normal, right? You pushed yourself 26.2, maybe it's the 13.1, but you pushed yourself. That's totally normal. But what's not normal is being unable to walk, right? Unable to like do life, your daily life, right? Get in the shower, go to the bathroom, things like that. If you're unable to do those things, that's not normal. Something is wrong. Your body has hot spots, right? So like maybe it's not like, oh, my Achilles is sore, but my Achilles is like hurt, or I really hurt my hamstring, something like that, which can happen during a race. You don't want that to happen. Or you have on the other side of things minimal soreness and fatigue, right? So these are polar opposites. So if you're, congratulations, if you're sore, achy, and have a little bit of pain, you race that marathon well. And if you're on the polar opposite sides of that, there could be some things to explain, right? It could be your training wasn't enough, right? It could be that you didn't get to those long runs, you didn't get to those workouts, you skipped runs. So when you got to the marathon, a lot of athletes think if they can run a half, they can run a marathon, which is dangerous territory because it's very different training. It's a totally different experience. And it's a lot harder to do that. And even if you run your long runs, um, up to 20 miles, you could still walk away from that marathon being extremely sore and fatigued. And I'm laughing right now because I trained for my first marathon with Nell, who's my current coach. We trained for CIM. And I think I ran 3 or 4 20 miles. Maybe it was 3. I had one all easy, and then I had 2 with like quality in them. Now, this is my first marathon, people. I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm like fatigued and sore after the long run, but I was able to like live life to a certain extent afterwards, right? Cut to CIM. I remember crossing the finish line, and the wave of pain that surged through my body was something I had never felt before in my life. And I was so surprised that I was that sore when I thought, but I'm just adding on a 10K, right? But you're adding on a 10K at faster pace. You're adding on a 10K, and it's not just the 10K, it's the rolling hills for the 26.2. Like there's a lot going on, right? So you should kind of have that like feeling of sore, achy, painful, but not to the extent where it's limiting you or walking off a plane looking like you didn't run a marathon if you're trying to race it, right? So the first marathon's always going to hit different. I think that's really important to know. But the more that you stack your training cycles and the more that you run marathons, so the more marathons that you actually run, the easier in quotes it feels, right? So a lot of those debut niggles and soreness will go away, and they'll go away over time. They'll go away over training cycles, and you'll shift into a feeling and a training feeling that you're more comfortable with. Um, but as you also grow as an athlete, your training is going to change. The stress in the training cycle is going to change. The stress outside of your training cycle is going to change. So you get to flow through it a little bit differently. But if you're falling into the either extreme, it's a good chance to evaluate what worked, what didn't work in your training, especially if you're very, very, very sore where it's impacting your life. Or if you're walking off the plane, like you could go run tomorrow, like I did after CIM, you probably left a lot out on the road, right? And in my case, it was like humidity, heat, sometimes it's really hard to find that gear, or you find the gear and you slip out of it, right? And then you're just running moderate pace. So that's weird. So you just don't feel that like fatigue that you feel like you should have with that. Now let's go into the long term, 6 to 8 weeks post race, 6 to 8 weeks post marathon. What's normal? Abnormal training is normal, right? Having that reverse taper is going to be very, very, very important. What is a reverse taper? A reverse taper is tapering back your miles. So just like you taper down for the race, you're going to taper your mileage back into a place where you were not at the very beginning of your last training cycle, but definitely not at peak. It's going to be kind of at that sweet spot. If that serves you, I have a lot of athletes who have time perimeters on what they can do. So I'm kind of handcuffed in a lot of ways with like mileage with some athletes of like, this is all they can give me. So this is all that we're working with. And that's okay. Right. But if you are someone who can be a bit more flexible with the mileage that you're running, you can start your next training cycle running a little bit higher mileage. And then it just starts to build. That's where I am, everyone. So that reverse taper is going to be very, very, very important. The abnormal training is absolutely normal. I think it's very normal for someone to come off of a marathon. I always like to give a full week off if it's Boston. So if anyone's listening that I coach who's running Boston, there's like 10 of you. It's going to be a great day. You're getting 10 days, week and a half, because that course is a lot, right? And that's what kind of goes into play. If you're running a really tough course that's really going to like really wreck your body and beat you up, let's take more rest, because when you get back into it, it's not going to feel good, and it's not going to feel good for a while. So let's just take the time to rest so we can feel better more quickly than trying to jump back into training and then just going through a cycle of like not feeling good. So getting back to training in that reverse taper, I think it's really normal to take an extra day off, or say like, I didn't feel like going out for a run today, so I skipped this day. That's normal. I think it's really hard to get back into training after racing. And I love running, and I love running daily, and I find it hard. I find it um, like I just want to take more rest, which is okay. I think it's also normal to not getting back into workouts too soon, or even adding strides. I think it's normal to have your first speed come back to be with like a workout on the track, and it's a very light workout, rather than throwing in strides. Like strides are great, but throwing strides in a like a recovery run as you're still trying to recover, probably not going to serve you well. But let's go into having a really strong rest period, a reverse taper, and then getting back on the track. Maybe it's a month later, and doing a light effort on the track, not all out, not even close to all out, but a very light effort, just to get the legs to turn over and see how you feel. Evaluate, did you feel really great? Did you like throw down something really fast at the end? Amazing. You're probably ready to do a little bit more. Did you feel just ick and gross? Great. We shook that out. You're probably going to be ready to go for a stronger effort the following week, right? Right? So off days are really important, really leaning into them. If the body doesn't feel good or 100%, definitely leaning into those recovery days, those off days, extra rest days, which is part of a reverse taper. Now, what's not normal is getting back to running and having chronic fatigue every single day. That means to me that there wasn't enough recovery happening, and more recovery gets to happen before we start running again, or running consistently, or running long, right? Like if your runs right now are 5 miles or 45 minutes or 50 minutes, maybe that's not the first run back, right? Maybe we hold at 30 minutes or 3 miles or something that's quite a bit lower than what you're used to. And if the fatigue's still there, just stopping it completely and taking more time to rest and recover, because ultimately we're setting ourselves up to be able to run forever, right? We want to be the ones to say, I'm choosing not to run, rather than the body telling us that we can't run, right? So, really listening to your body after the marathon. If you're unable to run, right, that's not normal in a sense of maybe you don't want to run. And I think it's normal to a certain extent. And then once you get, 6 to 8 weeks out, that's probably not as normal any longer, right? If you're needing to take months off in between training cycles because you're not motivated or your body feels terrible, there's something else going on that we have to figure out because something's not working. If you don't feel good on any training run with kind of like that chronic fatigue on training runs, or maybe it's chronic fatigue in life, just feeling run down every single day, maybe that inside tracker test is going to help you out. An athlete I coach, she lives in Minnesota. She's so great. She ended up taking a test. She was tired, but it wasn't anything alarming on my side. Her ferritin's in the garbage. That's what she said. Ferritin's in the garbage. It's in the trash. I think Megan Featherston has said that too, right? So she gets to work on that. And we get to, and she's been crushing her workout. So I can't wait to see what like a normal ferritin level is going to be for her. It's going to be a great year for her. So I think it can be normal. It can be something that happens, but we want to make sure that when things start to trend into the not normal of it lasting a little bit too long, you're not motivated to go out for runs. You're feeling fatigued during runs. You're feeling fatigued during life. You're unable to run. Those are all kind of big red flags, right? So my second marathon was the Boston Marathon in 2021, and that was the fall Boston. And that was such a fun season because it was post-pandemic-ish. So it was 2021. My first race back post-pandemic-ish. We were still in the pandemic, but races started to come back, was a half marathon that spring. And then I trained all summer long for Boston. I think what's really cool is my peak mileage that build was 63 miles for 1 week. And that was in 2021. And 2 years later, that is like basically my recovery week. And I'm saying that because I think it's really cool that if you stick with running, how cool it gets to be that you continue to stack and you get stronger and stronger and stronger. So I ran the 2021 Boston. It was in October. It was the third Monday in October. And no, it was probably the second Monday in October. And it was a warm day. Oh my gosh, I keep having these warm, humid days. And when I say warm, everyone, 55 degrees or under is good racing weather for the marathon. So if it's going to be 55 degrees or higher, or the real feel is 55 degrees or higher, or if the sun is out, it all plays an impact. And I remember after that run, I squeezed out like, I think a 75-second PR or something. It was a very terrible race though. There was a lot of walking. It was very terrible. I went out way too fast. There was a lot of factors going on. I had a race plan that didn't serve me and it was hot. So like I blew up fast. And I remember finishing and, I was just so excited to like have that experience, because I think that's what's really cool about Boston is if you run it and it doesn't go well on course, it doesn't really matter because you're running the Boston Marathon and like the vibes are just so high that it's just so cool. And on my plane ride back to Boulder, which was a few days later, my good friend came out, Tiffany, my sister came out. My sister flew back after the race, but my friend Tiffany and I hung out in Boston for a few days, which was a lot of fun. We flew back, and on that flight, I was like, I need to run another marathon, right? I had the bug, something about Boston. Well, it's Boston, but also like that energy was addicting. And it was something where I was like, I need to figure this out. So I signed up for a marathon. It was actually the Mesa Marathon 4 months later. It was in February. Here I am, it's October. I remember the race was on a Monday and I was running by Thursday of that week. And things felt fine for like a week. And then things didn't feel fine for a very long time. I would say that entire training cycle, I was flat, meaning my pace was flat. I didn't have any pop in my step. I was tired. My heart rate was through the roof. It was a lot. And when you do back to back races like that, and you don't take the time to rest and recover after the first one, that's not normal. So you can't really produce something fast and furious and strong coming up if you don't take that time to really recover, right? Honor yourself, honor what you need. And if that's movement, try and find movement in a different way. But that running needs to just like pause for just a minute, right? And that race didn't go well. That's Mesa. It's a net downhill. It's primarily downhill. There's a 2 mile section between miles 4 and 6 where you're running uphill, but it's all downhill. But that day, that was a great day. Jesse and I got to hang out at the start line together. It was like, I think it was a 6 a.m. start. This race starts incredibly early in the Pacific time. Or maybe they're on mountain time in the winter. I don't really know. But it was 6 a.m. and the bus dropped us off at like 4:30. We had a lot of time. So we ended up just sitting down and chatting. But it was a warm day. It was 55 at the start, and it's Arizona. Very, very different from this past weekend. The sun was out. It was in the 70s when I finished. It was wild. But I ran a 5-minute PR that day. I think it was the downhill because that didn't feel good. But that's like, I think when we say we love running, we love training, we also want to feel good, right? So like, let's not push the body. Let's give ourselves some rest, some recovery. Give ourselves a season if that's what we need, so we can show up, feel good, execute those workouts, have strong long runs, and just create a lot of fun in the process. All right, so pillar number 2 is nutrition. What's normal? Your body wanting more after the race is totally normal. It might feel weird because you're taking a week off. You feel like, well, I'm not really like exerting a lot of energy. Why am I hungry? Why am I starving? Why is my stomach growling? It's because your body's working overtime. It's working in overtime to repair all the damage. Yes, I said damage that your body took running that 26.2 miles. And I love a good race. I love a good marathon. But gosh, it really does wreak havoc on the body. And I think a lot of us don't understand what's actually going on in the inside, because we might feel just some aches and pains and then we can get back to running, within a few days. Or I've seen some people like just run the following day, which I don't advise at all. I feel like that's really playing with fire. Um, Really giving your body that time to rest, recover, repair, because there's a lot of damage that went on with the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, your organs, right? There's so much happening behind the scenes, and your body's working in overdrive to repair it, to make you feel good again. So it is working so hard, and you need to fuel it. And you also just crushed a marathon. So, like, that's a lot of calories, a lot of energy that was expended out in that 3, 4, 5 hour time frame that we're definitely not consuming back during that same day, right? As much as we try and fuel during the run and during the race, we still don't do a great job. And then I don't know about you, but I'm definitely never hungry after a marathon. And it takes a really long time. It's usually like 4 or 5 o'clock that day where I'm like, okay, I can eat. Now I force myself to eat after the race, and then like usually a snack or something. And then I just wait until I'm ready. But then it's playing catch up, right? Because your body really needs a lot more than what you're giving it. So you might be carved out after the marathon, right? With that amazing carbo load that you had. That's totally normal too. So you still absolutely want this macro as part of your post race week recovery, but you also want to focus in on, I think it's important to focus in on the foods that you actually want to eat, right? What is your body asking for? Is it like veggies? Is it hummus, cheese and crackers? Is it a burger, pizza? Like whatever it is, focus on that and just be satisfied, feel satisfied. Don't, it's such a slippery slope with feeling like, there isn't this like need to fuel because we're resting. And I know that can come up in training too, like, oh, I have a rest day. I should, not eat the same or eat differently than I do on a long run or a workout or a recovery day, which all of those days look a little bit different, everyone. But the rest days are actually one of the most important days to make sure that your nutrition is absolutely dialed because you're getting ready for the next day, right? So, what's not normal in this? It's going to be the opposite of everything I just mentioned, right? So, oftentimes, the athletes believe that when we're resting and not running, we don't need to fuel our bodies the same way, right? We just talked about that. So, this is the exact opposite of what you want to do. I love sports dietitian Kelsey on Instagram. I worked with her back in 2020 when I was showing up to running and having a lot of anxiety about like one, my personal life and like being in a pandemic and not having a job and like, trying to build Elevate and who's going to hire a coach when it's the pandemic and there's no racing, right? And just personal life stuff. And then also I was trying to run fasted because that's just what I had always done. And I love her, and she has so many great resources on Instagram. And I pulled this off of a post from a few weeks ago. And her light training, which is considered like a rest day, right? It's an average of 30 minutes or less of daily activity in the last week, or 0 to 15 miles weekly. 0 miles. So this could be that time, that week after the race, right? 0 miles. Your meals, you want to aim for still 3 meals a day that have 50% of plate comprised of color, 25% of protein, and 25% of carbohydrates. And don't forget your fats. Now, when she says color, she means vegetables and fruits. Snacks, you still want to aim for at least one snack a day. I'm a big believer in snacks, which is the carb to protein and fat ratio. So it has all three of those macros. And then also noting that complex carbs are going to be kind of a nice way to safely build in some good carbohydrates to make you feel full, to make you feel satisfied, and to help to contribute to your recovery and feeling so much better. So, if you're resting because of injury, this is going to look a lot different because you actually need to be consuming more to fuel your body to help recover the injured part or the injury itself. But that's going to look a lot different. That's going to be for another podcast, right? So fueling is super, super important. Always listen to your body, give it what it needs. I know it can be a little uncomfortable. It can be something that's maybe not intuitive. You could be someone that just forgets to eat. You could just have really busy days, but do what you have to do to set yourself up for success to flow through that. Because if you can take a week off from running after a big race, you can eat well and recover faster. Then that just means you get to run again and it's going to feel easier, better, and you're going to feel happier with it, which is always a good place to be. All right, sleep. What's normal? Not getting enough sleep is actually normal after a marathon or being unable to sleep. Did you know that? I didn't. I felt like I was this weirdo who was running marathons and like not sleeping the week after a race. And it's so sad because sleep is the number one recovery tool when you have like a big training cycle, when you have a big workout, long run, and then race. But your central nervous system is on overdrive after the race, and it really needs to calm down. Central nervous system, you need to calm down. And it is something where it's not just your nervous system, but it's also the body temperature remains elevated after a race. So you're going to have trouble sleeping if your body temperature is higher than what it normally would be. So exercise obviously elevates your body temperature, and cooling the body becomes increasingly difficult when you're also dehydrated. So let's put this all into context. You mean to say that after I run 26.2 miles, my central nervous system is shot, my muscles are shot, my ligaments, everything is shot, right? My body temperature is through the roof because I just have been running for 3 to 5 hours, and I'm dehydrated because I've been running for 3 to 5 hours. Then even if you're Even if you're carrying that handheld, you're taking cups from the water tables, you're taking in electrolytes. If you're running a warm race, it is still going to impact you. There will still be some level of dehydration, and that's all going to impact how you sleep. I would actually love to know this, and maybe we poll the audience in the question on Spotify this week of, do you notice how poor your sleep is the night after a race, right? I'd love to know that. Now, what's not normal with sleep is if you have extended periods of little sleep, poor sleep, or interrupted sleep, and it's not your kids waking you up. I know there's a lot of parents that listen to this, and I'm so sorry. I know this is such a touchy subject, and I feel like you could just probably skip the next 2 minutes because you might be getting great sleep after a race because your body's so exhausted, or you might not be sleeping at all ever. And I really, really apologize for that. That's not great, but it is what it is. So I think if you are kind of in that place of consistently not sleeping well, really practicing some winding down and bedtime routines, making it really intentional, and also don't stress about it, because the more you stress about it, just like anything, or hyperfixate on it, it's probably not going to go away, right? So bedtime routines, dim the lights, play some music, turn off the screens. I really like meditation music at night. Kenzie does too. As soon as I turn it on, she goes to sleep. It's so cute. And practice winding down, washing your face, getting into your pajamas, listening to music, maybe drinking some tea, turning the lights down, right? We need to make it so our bodies feel like it's time to really slow the roll and really take the time to fall asleep. All right. Pillar number 4, training. What's normal? Taking time off to rest and recover is super important. I think it's super important for the longevity of the sport. It's important for your body and your mind to recover from the race. And it's really important to stay healthy, right? So, the niggles, the overuse injuries, all of those things don't pop up later on. So, taking time off to rest and recover after you run a big race is normal. And we've talked about this earlier in the podcast. I've talked about it before. You see people running the next day, you see people putting in a lot of volume that next week. Just know that they're either at an elite level, which still isn't totally great. I know my coach, she's a super awesome athlete, elite athlete. She still takes a week off after a marathon, 6 days, 7 days. I think it's really, really important, and it's really normal to do that. And if you're, gosh, I'm just thinking about, I have a friend that he ran CIM 2019 too. I don't know if he listens to the podcast. And he also ran New York City that year. And New York City's at the beginning of November. He ran a sub-3 marathon, crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. New York's a hard course. Crushed it. Didn't take any time off. Not even a day. Continued to train, ran CIM, ran 3 minutes faster. Whew, that feels good, doesn't it? It's addicting. Next day, he went out for a run. He didn't take any time off, and he ended up tearing both of his hip labrums. So it's really important to rest and recover. It can be very, very stressful to go out for a run the week after a race, right? So you really have to evaluate, how did the race go? How does your body feel? What do you need? What's going to be best for you long term? Not what is everyone else doing that ran the same race, or my friend over here, or this podcast host, or this person over here, right? This Instagram influencer is doing this. Listening to what you need and setting yourself up for success is the most important thing. I think what's not normal when you get back into training is, obviously getting back into it too fast. I think signing up for another race that is within a very short time frame isn't normal, because it's very hard to produce something great again. My Boston to Mesa in 2021 to 2022, great example. 4 months, not enough, because I didn't take time. If I would have taken a full month and then had 3 months to train, I would have showed up so much differently. But we didn't do that. I didn't know any better. I think wanting to race hard again too soon is dangerous territory, right? Because you just put your body through something hard and you're playing with fire. You're playing with fire. Anytime that intensity is too great, it's too much, it's too close. I think sometimes if I don't recover hard enough in a week, I'm playing with fire. I'm like, woo, like this week in particular, wow, we are up leveling. I feel like it's one of the hardest weeks I've had. And I have to prioritize recovery, because am I not only running marathon mile weeks, I have 10-mile intensity with it. And it's a lot. So I have to recover really, 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 really hard. Like I've promised my coach I would. I think if there's this tendency of not on like being unable to take a day off, being unable to take a few days off or a full week off after a race, it would be important to maybe journal those feelings and what comes up for you with when I say, or when you hear rest day, rest week, what comes up, right? What feelings are going on with that? Because there's something underneath that gets to maybe get worked on, because there is something there, right? We should all be able to take time off, not too much time off, right? It's all a balancing act. You can take time off. I coach an athlete right now who takes months off between training cycles, and it's not good for him or for me or for me, but it happens, right? Because you lose a lot of fitness if you take too much time off. But if you take a week off, maybe take 2 weeks off. I had a gal, Sarah, ran CIM. She wanted 2 weeks off. Good. She said that on our race strategy call. I was like, whew, good. Amazing. I love that for you. I was going to give you a week. You want 2 weeks? Great. Take it. We're taking 2 weeks. It's when it turns into 4, 6, 8, or the opposite extreme of unable to stop, signing up for another race too quickly, right? It's all too much. It's too intense. And then you end up burned out or injured or both. I've seen it far too long and from too many people. It happens. It's just a matter of when. So if it's a sport, if this is a sport that you want to have in your life for as long as you want to have it in your life, being smart about your choices and how you're structuring your rest and recovery is going to be huge. All right, the last piece to today's episode is the mind and the mood attached to that post race. What's normal? Having a tired mind is totally normal. It's totally normal, right? You just went through 12, 16 weeks of tough training. Those long runs are tough. Those workouts are tough. You probably made sacrifices in your life, right? With your family, your friends, your social life. At this point, I just say, like, this is just how my life is. I feel like I just have to be the way with how much I'm running right now. I think I was like these last few months, I'm like trying to do it all, because I'm not like really leaning into like, oh my gosh, you are running marathon. It's like you're training for a marathon, Sarah. Like you have to look at it this way versus trying to do it all, because I'm exhausted, or I was exhausted. It's too much. That general fatigue. Training can be very fatiguing, not just body, but the mind, right? Post-marathon blues, 100% normal. You worked really hard for months, right? It could have been some of your identity, right? especially if you're an athlete who posts on Instagram every day or posts on social media, or you're getting kudos and you're getting likes for what you're doing with running. There's an attachment there. And I'm kind of guilty of that too. I'm trying to move away from it because when it's not there, it can feel lonely, right? It can feel a lot of different feels. I think also what's normal is not being happy or being extremely happy about the outcome, right? We all have our own feels. I think most of us, if we have a strong race, we still say, ooh, I could have ran that a little bit faster, right? How many of us say that? Could have done a little bit more. Probably not, or you would have done it on the course. But I think in hindsight, it's always easy to say that. So we could be happy, we could be not happy with the outcome, right? Not excited about racing, but wanting to run. I think that's very normal. Just wanting to get back into your routine, slowly ease back into it, not really looking into like, well, what's next? Let's just see how the body responds. Let's see what's happening. I think sometimes it can be tricky because I found myself in this situation after CIM. I kind of put like my own pressure on myself to put together a 2024 racing schedule because I had people say like, but you always have something lined up. I'm like, well, I don't this time. Like, I don't. And I felt this like also pressure with how fast some races fill up or the lottery system with races that you have to be planning so far in advance. And I really wanted to stay so present in that training cycle and execute a really great race and have a really strong outcome to say, like, based on this outcome, this time that I ran, this makes the most sense moving forward because we could have gone in a few different directions. But then I finished the race and I just didn't know what to do. I was very confused, right? I think that's very, very normal. I think what's normal is to always be proud of what you have achieved, no matter if it's a tough day or a breakthrough day. Our ego is typically attached to our results, right? So don't try not to let a silly race or a race impact how strong, awesome, confident, capable you are. Don't let it impact you. I like to say you are not your results. What happens out there on the course is not who you are, right? On a good day, it's fun to be like, but that's me on a good day, right? That's great. And on a tough day, you can say, that's not my best day. So that's not me. I can do something different, right? Having that attachment or detached from the feelings to the outcome to who you are as a person and as an athlete is huge. It's huge. What's not normal with your mood and your mind? After having appropriate rest and recovery, you're still not motivated to run. And this breaks my heart when people say, you know, I've coached athletes who say, I'm burnt out. And it's like the worst feeling as a coach. It's probably, you know, something as an athlete we don't want to admit to ourselves either, right? Because it's like, oh, then I missed something. I pushed them too hard, right? Something was there that I didn't see. They're not motivated to run. It could be that they had a tough race and they're still kind of in the feels with that, which is can be normal to a certain time frame, and then it's time to like move on, right? I want to run for joy. Ooh, training also gets to be joyful. I hear that one a lot, and that's also one that I cringe to. Like, if it's not joyful, why are we doing it? Right? Not 100% of training is going to be joyful. I ran a 14-mile progression long run on Saturday in the snow. And it was because I jumped on the treadmill, and for whatever reason, I was probably in my head about it. Now that I know what the temperature is in the room, 71 degrees. It's so hot. As a hot bodied runner, it's terrible for me. 2.5 miles in, I was like, got to pull this thing. I cannot do this run in this room right now. I think the other piece to it was that the snow wasn't quite sticking yet. So in my mind, I was like, gosh, I could just be out there running on the road. I'm going to go do that. But there was still a lot of ice and snow from the storm the week before. So it was not joyful. It really wasn't. But there are so many good pieces that get to be joyful, right? So as long as you have that balance, I think that's normal. I think what's not normal with mood in mind is if you're irritable, if you're moody for an extended period of time after the run or after the race, and spending time journaling about what's causing that. You know, is it your nutrition, your electrolyte levels? Is it, did the race not go well? What is it? And trying to find the root cause and then flowing through it. And I think too, the mindset of running because you should rather than wanting to run. Well, I should go run, right? I have a coach, I should run. Or I should run because all my friends are running. Or my running group's meeting, so I should go, right? You really, I'd love to see more of that want, right? You want to run, you want to show up, you want to do this because at the end of the day, life is short. It's how we started this episode. And how we choose to spend our time, who we choose to spend our time with is so important. It's so important. Cleaning out the energy that doesn't serve you, cleaning out the people, the vibe that just isn't where you are now is okay. That's part of life. It's part of the seasons in life. No one stays connected forever. I think there's such a great meaning around people who can come into our lives for a short period of time and make a really great impact for that period of time. And then there's going to be lifelong people, friends, friendships, connections that you have. That's life, right? And really leaning into everything you want to create in 2024, every person and energy and vibe that you want to surround yourself with. And if it doesn't serve you, that's okay. Maybe it's something you don't need to necessarily mention to someone. And maybe it is a type of relationship where you do need to mention it. Think, do what serves you. Be kind, be brave, be bold, be compassionate, and also know what fills your cup, what creates joy for you, and go from there. So that's this week's episode. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. If you experience any of these situations that I've shared today, take a step back, pause, give yourself some grace, take more time to rest in the short term. It's only going to propel you forward for future training. You can lean into your hobbies, for relationships that you haven't been connected with as much as you want to be. It can be totally tough to do all of this, training, life, doing all the things, but know that you totally got this. Elevate Community is on your side. And thank you so much for listening. Rate, subscribe, leave a review on Spotify, Apple, please. I'd greatly, greatly appreciate it. You can also contribute a monthly donation to the podcast. That link is in the description notes here. Thank you so much. I hope you had a great week, and we'll continue to do this again next week.